Hello and welcome to Stories by Peter Hubb. Jake Harrison had two lives, and both of them had a view of the Las Vegas Strip. The first was a penthouse condominium in Summerlin, a modern, sterile monument to his success. It was a place of polished marble floors, panoramic windows that framed the distant, shimmering chaos of the city, and the comforting, predictable hum of a multi-million-dollar HVAC system. Here he was a respected architect, a husband to a poised and beautiful woman named Sarah, and a father to two bright, energetic kids, Liam and Mia. This was the life he built, the one he showed the world, the one that seemed to defy the chaos of the city below with its quiet, domestic perfection. His second life was a small, two-story house in the heart of Henderson, a maze of quiet suburban streets where the desert heat settled in the afternoon, and the only light pollution came from a neighbor's porch lamp. Here, he was simply Jake, the man who brought groceries on Tuesday nights and listened to jazz on a beat-up record player. This life belonged to Elena. For 2 years, Jake had been a master of this precarious balancing act. His architectural firm, Harrison & Co., was in the middle of a massive hotel and casino project on the Strip, and the demands of the work provided a convenient cover for his frequent, late-night meetings and site inspections. Sarah, busy with her charity work and the kids' school schedules, seemed none the wiser. Their marriage, he told himself, was a partnership of convenience and mutual respect, built on a foundation of shared goals. Passion was a ghost of the past, a fleeting memory of younger days. With Elena, however, it was different. She was a painter, wild and creative, a free spirit who saw the city not as a monument to be built, but as a vibrant canvas of light and shadows. She represented a part of his soul he thought he'd lost, a reckless, spontaneous streak buried beneath layers of professionalism and family responsibility. The unraveling began on a Thursday night. It was Jake's night in Henderson. He had left the office, sent a quick text to Sarah about a last-minute design change, and was on his way to Elena's. He had already planned their evening: Thai food from their favorite local spot, a new bottle of wine, and the latest album from a blues artist she loved. It was a ritual, a sacred escape from the pressure of his other life. He pulled up to the curb, a familiar knot of excitement and anxiety tightening in his stomach. The house was dark. He checked his phone. No new messages from her. That was odd. Usually she'd send a text telling him the food was on the table or that she'd opened the wine. He tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail. "Hey, it's me. I'm here. Everything okay?" he said into the phone, his voice a little too casual to hide his growing unease.
He walked up to the front door and tried the handle. Locked. He knocked, a little harder this time. No answer. A chill, unrelated to the evening desert air, crept up his spine. He tried the back door, and then the windows, his movements becoming more frantic with each failed attempt. Nothing. The house was silent and still. He walked back to his car, his mind racing. This was completely out of character for Elena. She was meticulous, especially about their time together. She would never just disappear without a word. Did she leave him? The thought was a sharp, painful jab. But if so, why the silence? Why not a single text? And why the locked doors? It didn't make sense. His anxiety gave way to a cold, hard sense of dread. He imagined the worst-case scenarios, a rapid-fire succession of images flashing through his mind. A car accident, a sudden illness, something far more sinister. He knew he couldn't go to the police. What would he say? "My mistress is missing, and I can't find her?" The scandal would be front-page news. It would destroy everything. No. He had to handle this himself. He drove home, his mind numb. The drive back to Summerland, a journey he had made countless times, felt endless. The neon lights of the strip, usually a welcome sight, now seemed like a mocking, garish spectacle. He pulled into his garage, the automated door closing behind him like the final curtain on his perfect life. Sarah was in the living room, reading a book. She looked up, her expression unreadable. "You're home early," she said, her voice even. "The design change was simpler than you thought?" Jake's heart hammered in his chest. Was there a hint of irony in her voice? A subtle accusation? He forced a smile. "Something like that. Finished up faster than expected. Long day." "I bet," she replied, turning a page. Her eyes, cool and analytical, lingered on him for a moment too long. "You look exhausted." He mumbled something about a headache and went to the kitchen to pour a glass of water, his hands trembling slightly. He looked at his reflection in the dark glass of the microwave door. His face, usually so composed, was pale and drawn. He looked like a man who had seen a ghost.
Later that night, as Sarah slept soundly beside him, Jake lay awake, his mind replaying the evening's events. He was a man of logic and order, an architect who built towering structures from precise calculations. This situation, however, was a void, an unknown variable with no clear solution. The perfect, polished life he had built felt like a fragile glass house on the edge of a cliff, and he had a terrible feeling that the first pebble had just been dropped. He knew he had to go back to Henderson, and this time he couldn't leave until he found out what had happened. He had to find Elena. The fate of both his lives depended on it. He had no idea that the answer wasn't out there in the dark streets of Henderson, but right here, in his own bed, sleeping soundly beside him. He had no idea that he wasn't just investigating a disappearance. He was walking right into a trap that had been meticulously laid for him, brick by painstaking brick, for years. He had no idea that Sarah, his wife, was the architect of his true fate, and the city of Las Vegas was merely the stage. He just knew he had to find out where Elena was. His next move would be to gain access to her house. Legally or not, he was willing to risk anything to find the truth, not yet realizing that the truth was far more dangerous than the lie. The next morning, the polished veneer of Jake's Summerlin life felt like a costume he couldn't take off. The crisp white shirt, the tailored suit, the polite conversation with Sarah over black coffee. It all felt like a performance. He had spent the night staring at the ceiling, his mind a whirlwind of fear and denial. He needed answers, and he knew they were in that little house in Henderson. "I have an early meeting with the contractors," he lied, his voice sounding foreign even to his own ears. Something about a new wiring plan. Sarah nodded, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. "Of course, darling. Don't work too hard." Her gaze, as always, was unnervingly sharp. Jake felt a flicker of unease, a cold sensation that something in her tone didn't quite match her words. He shook it off, telling himself it was just his guilt twisting her innocent remarks. He drove the 30 minutes to Henderson, the morning sun already beginning to bake the asphalt. The quiet streets, usually so welcoming, now seemed to hold a sinister silence. The little house stood exactly as he had left it, dark, silent, and impenetrable. He parked a few doors down, his heart pounding a desperate rhythm against his ribs. He needed to get in. Breaking a window was out of the question. Too loud, too obvious. He circled the house, his architect's mind cataloging every detail. The lock on the front door was a standard deadbolt. The back window was a little high, but not impossible. Then he remembered. Months ago, they had been drinking wine on the back patio. Elena, with a playful smile, had told him a secret. "If you ever lose your key, darling," she'd said, "just check under the third paver from the right next to the hydrangea. It's my little rebellion against digital locks." He had laughed, dismissing it as one of her whimsical quirks. Now, it was his only hope. He knelt by the flower bed, his hands shaking slightly as he counted the pavers. The third one from the right was loose. He lifted it, revealing a small plastic key tucked neatly underneath. A wave of relief, so strong it nearly buckled his knees, washed over him. He was in. He put the key in the back door and turned it, the click of the lock echoing in the morning quiet. He stepped inside, the familiar smell of paint and turpentine filling his senses. He half expected to find a scene of chaos, a struggle, a sign of what had happened. But the house was perfectly, unsettlingly neat. The Thai food he had planned to bring was still on his mind, but there was no sign of a meal prepared, no dishes in the sink. The new record he had planned to bring lay unopened by the record player. Everything was in its place, as if Elena had just stepped out for a minute. This wasn't a panicked disappearance. It was a planned one. He walked through the house, his eyes scanning for any sign of her, a note, a clue. In the living room, a half-finished painting sat on an easel, a vibrant swirl of reds and blues. It looked like the blurred lights of the Las Vegas Strip. He smiled faintly. That was so Elena. He ran his hand over the canvas, the paint dry to the touch. This wasn't something she had just started. She hadn't been here in a while. But why? He moved to the small office she used as a studio. The desk was meticulously organized, a stack of bills and papers neatly arranged. As he rummaged through her drawers, his fingers brushed against something hard, wrapped in a cloth. He pulled it out. It was a small, worn, antique wooden box. He had never seen it before. It was locked. He tried to pry it open, but it was sturdy. He was about to give up when he noticed something on the underside of the box, a tiny, almost invisible etching. It was a stylized H and C intertwined, surrounded by a subtle geometric pattern. A cold shock coursed through his body. He knew that symbol. It was the logo for his own firm, Harrison & Co., a logo he himself had designed years ago. Why would Elena have this box, and why would she have his company's logo etched into it? A new, terrifying thought began to form. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a random item she'd found. This box was meant for him. It was a clue, a test, a message left for him to find. But by whom? Elena? Or someone else who knew about his double life?
He looked around the room again, a frantic energy now coursing through him. He saw a small, framed photo on her desk, one he had always dismissed as just a casual snapshot of Elena and a friend. He picked it up. It was a photo of her at a charity gala, a formal event he had attended with Sarah months ago. But as he looked closer, he saw something in the background, out of focus. It was Sarah, standing with a woman he didn't recognize, and she was looking right at the camera, her expression unreadable. It was the same look she had given him last night. A chill ran down his spine that had nothing to do with the Las Vegas heat. He put the photo back down, his hands trembling. The note, the photo, the meticulously clean house, it all pointed to one terrifying conclusion. Elena hadn't disappeared. She had been taken, and someone who knew about him, someone who knew about his wife, was behind it. He was now a pawn in a game he hadn't even known he was playing. He knew he couldn't go to the police, not with this. This was no missing persons case. This was blackmail or something far worse. He slipped the wooden box into his jacket pocket and walked out of the house, locking the door behind him. He looked at the street, a sense of paranoia gripping him. Had anyone seen him enter? Was he being watched? He saw an old car parked across the street, a flash of something in the driver's seat. He couldn't be sure if it was just the sun's reflection or a camera lens. He was too deep now. He had found the first thread, and it led right back to his own life, a life he had believed to be so secure. The man who had built towering glass structures was now living in a house of cards, and with every step he took, he felt the entire structure shaking, on the verge of collapse. He had to figure out what was in the box, and he had to do it before his other life, the one he had worked so hard to build, came crashing down around him. Jake returned to his penthouse, the small wooden box feeling like a lead weight in his pocket. The serene view of the Strip, once a source of pride, now seemed to mock his inner turmoil.
The city's neon-drenched facade was just a lie, much like the one he had built his life upon. He needed to get into that box, and he needed to do it without Sarah knowing. The thought of confronting her with the evidence was terrifying. He didn't know what she was capable of. He went to his home office, a space filled with blueprints and architectural models, a sanctuary of order that now felt profoundly alien. He closed the door and locked it. The box sat on his desk, a simple, unassuming object that held the key to his unfolding nightmare. He examined it again. The stylized H&C logo was a painful reminder of his own hand in this. The lock was an old-fashioned brass tumbler lock, without a visible keyhole. He cursed under his breath. It was a puzzle, an architect's puzzle.
He ran his fingers over the intricate geometric patterns surrounding the logo. It wasn't just for decoration, it was a code. He saw a series of grooves and subtle indentations. It took him back to a conversation he'd had with Elena, a random late-night chat about their hobbies. He had mentioned his fascination with mechanical puzzles, how he used to build small wooden boxes with hidden locks in college. She had listened intently, asking questions about the logic and the methods. He had laughed, dismissing it as a silly obsession. Now, he realized she hadn't been listening for fun. She had been gathering information. She was giving him a key, a very specific one, without him even knowing it. He carefully pressed on the edges of the etching, testing each groove. He felt a small click. He pressed a different one. Another click. He followed the pattern, a sequence of 4 presses, his heart thumping in time with each tiny sound. With the final press, a small, almost imperceptible panel slid open on the side of the box, revealing a keyhole. He had no idea where the key was. He searched the Henderson house and found nothing. He had to improvise. He rummaged through a desk drawer and found a collection of paper clips and thin wire. He had seen enough movies to know the general principle of lockpicking, but he was an architect, not a cat burglar. He worked slowly, his hands clumsy with anxiety. After 20 minutes of fumbling, he was about to give up when he felt a tiny give, a slight turn in the tumbler. He carefully applied pressure, and with a soft final click, the box sprang open. Inside, nestled on a bed of dark velvet, were 2 objects: a small silver flash drive and a single crisp photograph. Jake's hand trembled as he picked up the photo. It was a close-up shot of Sarah, but not as he knew her. She was younger, her face hardened by a cold, calculating resolve. She was standing next to a man he'd recognized from the city's financial pages, Mark Reynolds, a venture capitalist and known corporate raider. In the background, a whiteboard was covered in a complex diagram. It showed the corporate structure of Harrison & Co., with various entities and subsidiaries circled and connected by arrows. One line was drawn directly from an offshore holding company identified only by an acronym to a new project, the Strip Hotel and Casino he was currently building. The words "hostile takeover" were scrawled in the corner. Jake's world tilted on its axis. This wasn't about a missing woman. This was about his life's work, his legacy, his very identity. Sarah wasn't just a scorned wife. She was a professional saboteur, working with a corporate rival to systematically dismantle his firm. The charity galas, the business dinners, the perfect Summerlin life. It was all a cover, a carefully constructed facade to get close to him, to gain his trust and access to his life and his projects. The photograph of Elena at the charity gala with Sarah wasn't a coincidence. They knew each other. Elena wasn't just his mistress, she was an accomplice, an informant, perhaps even a victim of the same scheme.
His mind reeled. Sarah had used his own infidelity against him. She had turned his most reckless secret into the perfect weapon. By running to Elena, he had been walking into a trap, providing her with the perfect leverage. He picked up the flash drive, his fingers numb. He had to know what was on it. He plugged it into his computer. The drive contained a single folder labeled Project Atlas. Inside were dozens of files, emails, contracts, financial records, and detailed plans. He started clicking through them, his panic giving way to a cold, focused fury. The documents confirmed his worst fears. Sarah and Reynolds had been working together for over 3 years. They had set up a complex web of shell corporations and offshore accounts,
using his own design plans and company resources to bleed his firm dry from the inside. They had planned to use the new hotel project as their final move, burying the firm in so much debt and legal trouble that they could swoop in and buy it for a fraction of its value. The drive also contained files detailing conversations about Elena, referring to her as an asset who had been compromised and needed to be removed from the board. Jake's heart sank. Elena wasn't a pawn. She had been part of this, willingly or not. Was she missing or had she run? The documents hinted at a falling out. She was no longer a victim in his eyes. She was a traitor too. But a traitor to whom? To him or to Sarah and Reynolds? The drive didn't say. He looked up, his eyes meeting his reflection in the dark glass of the window. He saw a man who had been utterly and completely played. The man who prided himself on seeing every angle, on building and creating, had failed to see the one structure built to destroy him. His marriage, his career, his second life with Elena, they were all threads in a single devastating tapestry of betrayal. The game was far more complex than he had ever imagined, and he had just learned the rules. He had no idea what his next move should be, but he knew he had to make it fast. He was a cornered animal, and his options were dwindling. The only thing he knew for sure was that he was now alone in this, and he couldn't trust anyone, not even his own wife. The real game had just begun.
Jake stared at the screen, the cold glow of the monitor illuminating the damning evidence of his wife's and his mistress's betrayal. The documents on the flash drive were a roadmap to his own destruction. Sarah wasn't just a scorned lover. She was a predator, a corporate saboteur. And Elena, the woman he thought was his secret escape, was either her pawn or her accomplice. His mind, once a fortress of logical plans and structural integrity, was now a crumbling ruin. He was a man who had built a perfect facade of success and family, only to find the foundation was made of sand. He knew he couldn't go to the police. What would he say? My wife and my mistress conspired to ruin me, and here's the proof I got from my mistress's abandoned house, which I broke into? The scandal alone would destroy his reputation and his family long before any legal action could be taken. He was caught in his snare, and his only way out was to fight back. But how? He was an architect, not a fighter. His mind immediately went to the person who could help him, the one man he knew who operated outside the lines of conventional law and business, Frank Miller, an old college friend, now a grizzled and retired private investigator. Frank had always been the one to see the angles no one else did, to find the truth buried beneath the lies. Jake had lost touch with him years ago, but he knew he had to try. He rummaged through an old address book, his fingers fumbling past names and numbers he hadn't thought of in a decade. He found it, a cell phone number scribbled on a worn page. He dialed it, his heart hammering against his ribs. It rang twice before a gruff, tired voice answered. Miller? Frank, it's Jake Harrison, from college. I need your help. There was a long silence on the other end, so long that Jake thought the call had been dropped. Jake Harrison. I figured you'd have forgotten about a guy like me, what with your big towers and all. What's the matter? Your perfect little life not so perfect anymore? Jake swallowed hard. It's complicated. I have a situation, a corporate matter. It involves a hostile takeover, blackmail, and my family. I have some information, but I don't know who to trust. Sounds like you're a kind of mess, Jake. You build things, and people like me clean up the wreckage. Meet me at my office, tomorrow. Don't call, don't text, just show up. Come alone. The line went dead.
Jake hung up, a small sliver of hope cutting through the despair. At least he wasn't completely alone. But he still had to navigate his life in the interim, and his main obstacle was right there under his own roof. He went to the living room. Sarah was on a conference call, her voice calm and professional as she discussed a charity fundraiser. She hung up and smiled at him. "Everything all right, darling? You look like you haven't slept." "I'm fine," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. He sat on the opposite sofa, the new reality of their marriage weighing down on him like a physical burden. Every word, every glance, every touch was now a potential lie. He looked at her, truly looked at her. He saw the cold resolve he had seen in the photograph, the hard glint in her eyes that he had always dismissed as ambition. Now he knew it was something else entirely. It was a predator's gaze. "I was thinking that with the new hotel project, you might need a little break. Why don't you take a couple of days off? The kids would love to go to Lake Mead. It would be good for you." Jake's mind raced. Was she trying to get him out of the city so she could make her final move? Or was this a genuine offer, a final act of a wife who, in some part of her, still cared for the man she was betraying? He had to play along. He needed to buy himself time. "That's a great idea," he said, forcing a smile. "Let me think about it." Sarah's smile widened, and for a terrifying moment, it felt genuine. He had to remind himself that she was an artist of manipulation, a master of a performance far more intricate than any building he had ever designed. He was a character in her play, and he needed to find a way to rewrite the script before the curtain fell on his life. He had the flash drive, he had Frank, but he had no idea what to do with them. He was a chess piece moved by an unseen hand, and now he had to learn how to move on his own. He was no longer building, he was surviving. The next 24 hours were a blur of fake meetings and tense moments, each interaction with Sarah a new test of his acting skills. He had to get to Frank's office, and he had to do it without her knowing. He was walking a tightrope, and the city of Las Vegas, once his stage, was now his cage. Jake navigated the labyrinthine back streets of downtown Las Vegas, a part of the city he rarely visited. This was the city's underbelly, a world of pawn shops, grimy diners, and flickering neon signs that had long lost their luster. Frank Miller's office was tucked away in a nondescript brick building, its peeling paint and barred windows a stark contrast to the gleaming glass of Jake's own creations. The fear that had been gnawing at him since he found the flash drive was now a cold, hard knot in his stomach. He was stepping into a world he didn't understand, a world of shadows and secrets, and he had no idea if he would make it out. He found the office door, a simple wooden slab with the words F. Miller Investigations stenciled in faded letters. He knocked, and a moment later, the door swung open. Frank was a mountain of a man. His face a roadmap of hard-won experience. His hair was a wild shock of gray, and his eyes, a startling blue, held a weary but intelligent glint. He wore a simple flannel shirt and jeans, a world away from the tailored suits Jake was used to. "Come in, Jake. Don't just stand there," Frank said, his voice a low rumble. Jake stepped inside. The office was exactly as he'd imagined. A single cluttered room filled with file cabinets, a messy desk, and a faint smell of stale coffee and old paper. A single lamp cast a warm golden light over the chaos. Frank motioned to a worn leather chair. "Coffee?" Frank asked, gesturing to a thermos on his desk. Jake shook his head. "All right then, let's see what you got." Jake pulled the flash drive from his pocket and placed it on the desk. He felt a moment of hesitation, a final chance to back out of this. But the thought of Sarah's cold, calculating smile and the image of Elena, a potential victim, spurred him on. He had to know the truth, no matter how ugly it was. "Everything I have is on there," Jake said, his voice trembling slightly. I'm an architect, Frank. I build things. I don't know how to deal with this." Frank grunted, plugging the drive into his computer. He was silent for a long time, his eyes moving rapidly over the files, his expression unreadable. Jake sat there, watching him, feeling like a patient waiting for a diagnosis. The silence stretched, filled only by the hum of the computer and the distant wail of a siren. Finally, Frank turned to him, his expression grim. You're in deep, Jake. Deeper than you think. This isn't just a hostile takeover. This is a personal vendetta. That Reynolds guy, Mark Reynolds, he's a shark. He's been circling your firm for years. But this is different. He's not just trying to take your business. He's trying to ruin you. And your wife? She's his co-conspirator. Jake nodded, the words hitting him like a physical blow, even though he had already known. "What about Elena?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "The flash drive mentions her as an asset who was compromised. Did they hurt her?" Frank's expression softened slightly. He looked at Jake, a hint of genuine concern in his tired eyes. "I'll make some calls," he said. He picked up his phone, dialed a number, and spoke in a language Jake didn't understand, a clipped, secretive argot of street names and coded references. After a few minutes, he hung up. "She's alive," Frank said, "but she's being held. Not in a cellar or anything, but she's not free. Reynolds has her." "Why?" asked Jake, his mind racing. "What does he want with her?" "They had a falling out," Frank said. "She was a part of their plan, but she got cold feet. She didn't want to go through with it. She knew what they were planning, and she tried to back out. She tried to warn you, Jake. That's what the box was about. That was her message. She knew you'd be the only one to find it, the only one who would understand the puzzle. She was trying to give you a fighting chance, but Reynolds got to her first." Jake felt a wave of shame and regret wash over him. He had been so blind. He had seen Elena as a source of pleasure and a temporary escape, but she had been fighting a battle he hadn't even known existed. He had misjudged her, and in his self-absorption, he had put her in danger. "So what do we do now?" Jake asked, his voice firming. The panic was gone, replaced with a cold, hard resolve. He wasn't a pawn anymore. He was a player. He had to save Elena, and he had to take down Sarah and Reynolds.
"This is going to be a long game," Frank said, his eyes now alive with a predatory intelligence. "You can't go to the police. The evidence is too circumstantial, and they'll have it buried in a week. We have to beat them at their own game. We have to find something on Reynolds that's so big, so undeniable, that it will not only save Elena, but bring the whole house of cards down. We have to find something they can't hide, something that will force their hand." Frank stood up and walked over to a whiteboard, his movements surprisingly agile for a man his size. He began to draw a complex diagram with arrows and circles, just like the one Jake had seen in the photograph. "This is your new project, Jake, your new blueprint. We're going to build a case against them, and we're going to start with a little digging into the offshore account they're using. I have a contact who can get us some information. But for now, you need to go home. Act normal. Pretend you know nothing. And if Sarah tries to get you to leave town, you go. You play her game, but you don't do anything without calling me first. You're the bait now, Jake. You're the hunter, but you're also the hunted. And if they suspect for 1 second that you know, it's over. For all of us." Jake nodded, feeling a mix of dread and exhilaration. He had been a successful architect, a master builder of dreams. Now he was a spy in his own home, a man living a lie to protect the very life he had been so close to destroying. The game had just begun, and the stakes were higher than he could have ever imagined. He had found his hunter, but he knew the hunted were waiting for him. Jake left Frank's office, the weight of the flash drive in his pocket replaced by the heavier burden of knowledge. He was a man with a target on his back, a pawn in a game he was just beginning to understand. The first step was to play his part. He returned home and accepted Sarah's offer to go to Lake Mead, pretending it was a spontaneous escape from the pressures of work. He even managed a genuine-looking smile. Sarah was unnervingly efficient. Within an hour, she had the kids packed and ready. They rented a luxurious houseboat, a sleek, modern vessel that felt like a mockery of his collapsing life. As they sailed out onto the vast, shimmering expanse of Lake Mead, surrounded by the barren, majestic beauty of the canyons, Jake felt a fleeting sense of peace. But it was a fragile illusion.
He knew he was sailing into a trap with his family as his unwitting bait. While the kids swam and laughed, Sarah would be on her phone, her voice a low murmur, her eyes fixed on the horizon as she spoke to Mark Reynolds. Jake watched her, a predator disguised as his devoted wife. He felt a cold rage building inside him, but he suppressed it. He had to be patient. He had to wait for Frank's signal. It came the next morning. His phone buzzed with an encrypted message. Got it. The account. It's a shell corporation called Seraph. Jake's heart pounded. Seraph. He remembered the photo on the flash drive, the complex diagram with the words hostile takeover scrawled in the corner. He'd seen a similar acronym in the financial documents. It was a holding company. Reynolds and Sarah had been funneling money through it for years, a complex network of transactions designed to hide the true source of their funding. Frank had found the financial blueprint for their entire operation.
That night, Jake decided to make his move. He waited until the kids were asleep and Sarah was on the deck, nursing a glass of wine. The moonlight cast a silver sheen over the water, and the silence was broken only by the gentle lap of waves against the hull. He walked out to meet her, the flash drive now in his hand. "It's a beautiful night, isn't it?" Sarah said, without turning around. "It is," Jake replied, his voice flat. He felt his hands begin to shake, but he forced them to be still. "I'm not going to beat around the bush, Sarah. I know." Sarah slowly turned, her face a mask of practiced calm. "Know what, darling?" He held up the flash drive. "I know about you and Reynolds. I know about the hostile takeover. I know about Seraph. I know you've been using our marriage to get access to my firm and my life's work. I know all of it." A slow, chilling smile spread across Sarah's face. "Jake, my dear, you're a brilliant architect, but you're so naive. Do you really think I would be so careless? Do you think I didn't know you would go back to that house? Do you think I didn't plan for this? The only reason I haven't moved on you is because I needed a final piece of leverage." He felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He had miscalculated. She wasn't just a partner in a hostile takeover, she was a master manipulator. "What are you talking about?" he said, his voice a strained whisper. "The kids," she said, her voice dropping to a low, venomous hiss. "If you take this to anyone, if you try to expose me, I'll make sure you lose them. I have lawyers, Jake. I have connections. I'll make it look like you're a reckless, unstable father, a man who endangered his family by having a second life. I'll use your affair against you. You think you're in a game with me? You're not. You're my pawn. You always were." She walked toward him, her eyes burning with an almost frightening intensity. "You were too easy to control, Jake. The successful architect, so desperate for a little excitement that he'd risk everything for a pretty face. You were the perfect distraction." His world, which had already been shattered, crumbled even further. The affair wasn't his secret weapon, it was her perfect alibi. She had used his own infidelity as a tool to control him. He had been playing right into her hands from the very beginning. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Frank, but it wasn't the information on Seraph. It was a single sentence. "I found her. The Cosmopolitan, room 2712. Jake's heart leapt. Elena. She was alive. A new, desperate hope surged through him, replacing the crushing weight of Sarah's betrayal. He looked at his wife, her face a mask of cold satisfaction, and a new resolve hardened in him. He had been played, but the game wasn't over. Not yet. He turned and walked away from her, the flash drive in his hand. He would deal with Sarah later. Right now, he had to go to the Cosmopolitan. He had to find Elena. He had to know the full truth.
He knew the fight had just begun, and it was no longer about his company or his legacy. It was about survival. He called Frank. "I'm heading to the Cosmo." Frank's voice was grim. "Jake, wait. We don't know what's waiting for you there. It could be a trap." "I'll take my chances," Jake said, his voice a low growl. "I have to know. I have to find out what happened to her. She's the only one who can tell me the whole story." He hung up, leaving Sarah standing alone on the deck, her smile slowly fading as she realized he hadn't broken. He had just changed his game plan. Jake was on the move, and this time he was playing to win. He drove back to the city, the bright lights of the Strip feeling less like a cage and more like a battlefield. Jake's SUV tore through the Las Vegas night. The glittering neon of the Strip, usually a backdrop for his triumphs, now felt like a taunting inferno. He ignored the furious horns, his focus laser-sharp on the Cosmopolitan Hotel ahead. The text from Frank, "I found her, the Cosmopolitan, room 2712, was a beacon of hope in a sea of betrayal. He had to know the truth. He had to find Elena. He abandoned his car in the parking garage and sprinted to the elevator, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. The ride to the 27th floor was an agonizingly slow climb. He gripped the flash drive in his pocket, its tiny plastic form holding all the evidence of his ruined life. He was no longer the master builder. He was just a man, desperate and cornered. He found room 2712 and knocked, his hand trembling. The door opened slowly, revealing not the disheveled and terrified woman, but Elena, her face pale but resolute. Her expression was a mix of exhaustion and relief. She had been waiting for him. "You came," she said, her voice a soft, tired whisper. "Frank found you," Jake replied, pushing past her into the room. He closed the door and locked it. The room was immaculate, a typical hotel suite, but the air was thick with tension. "Frank," she said, a small, knowing smile on her face. "He's good. They almost had me." "Who?" Jake demanded. "You and Sarah? You were working with her? With Reynolds? My wife is trying to ruin me, and you're a part of it." Elena's face hardened. She walked over to the window, staring out at the chaotic cityscape. "Jake, you have no idea what you're talking about. I wasn't working with them. I was trying to get away from them, from him."
Jake felt his anger give way to confusion. "The flash drive, the documents, they say you were an asset." "I was," she said, her voice full of a pain that felt authentic. "But not in the way you think. I wasn't a corporate spy. I was a target. Reynolds got to me first. He threatened my family, my sister, who lives in New York. He found out about us and he used it to blackmail me. He said he would ruin you and destroy me if I didn't help him." Jake's mind reeled. Help him with what? With you. He needed an inside track, a way to get information on your personal life, your firm, your projects. He needed to find your weaknesses, your vulnerabilities. He knew he couldn't get it from Sarah, not without drawing too much attention to their collaboration. So he used me. He thought you were an easy mark, a man desperate for an escape. "So you gave him what he wanted?" Jake said, the rage returning. "I gave him a little," Elena confessed. "Just enough to make him think I was on his side. I was buying time, Jake. I knew what he was planning was far worse than a simple hostile takeover. He doesn't just want your company. He wants to see you personally ruined. He wants to see you fall. It's personal. He said your father, years ago, had ruined his family. He wanted revenge." Jake felt the last of his carefully constructed world fall apart. His father, a man he had idolized, a man whose legacy he had tried to live up to, was a part of this. The betrayal went back further than he ever could have imagined. This was a vendetta spanning decades. The box.
Jake said, his voice a low growl. "Why the box?" "I knew they were going to come for me," she explained. "I knew Reynolds was becoming suspicious. I couldn't risk leaving any digital trail. I had to get the information to you somehow. The box was the only way. I knew you would solve it. It was our secret, our little puzzle. I left enough breadcrumbs for you to find it, but not enough for them. I left the photo of Sarah and Reynolds so you would know who you were dealing with. I thought I was giving you a fighting chance, but they caught me. They're holding me here, telling me I have to cooperate or they'll go after my family. Reynolds is watching this place. They're everywhere." Jake looked around the room, his mind racing. They were in a trap, he and Elena, two victims of a carefully orchestrated betrayal. They had to act now. They had to expose them. "We have to go to the police," Jake said, his voice firm. "We have the flash drive, the account numbers. They can't get away with this." Elena shook her head. "It won't work. The evidence you have, it's not enough. They'll say it's fabricated. They'll use your affair against you. They'll say you're a vengeful ex-lover trying to ruin your wife and a business rival. They'll use my past against me. They've covered their tracks. This isn't a simple case, Jake. Reynolds is a psychopath. He's a monster. He'll destroy us both if we try to fight him on his terms."
A cold sweat broke out on Jake's forehead. He had been so wrong. His entire life was a lie, a carefully constructed illusion, and he had been playing a part he didn't even know existed. He wasn't a player. He was a piece on a chessboard, and he was about to be checkmated. "So what do we do?" Jake asked, his voice filled with despair. "If we can't go to the police, then what's our move?" Elena walked towards him, her eyes filled with a new resolve. "We have to beat them at their own game. We have to do what they're doing. We have to expose them, but not through the legal system. We have to do it publicly. We have to take them down in the court of public opinion. We have to find something so damning, so undeniable, that it will destroy their reputation, their company, everything they've built." She reached for his hand. "We have to fight, Jake. We have to fight together. I can help you. I know all their secrets. I know their vulnerabilities. I know what they're planning next. I was their pawn, but now I'm your ace in the hole. We're going to use everything they used against us to destroy them. They think they have us trapped, but they don't know who they're dealing with." Jake looked at her, at the fire in her eyes, and for the first time in days, he felt a flicker of hope. He wasn't alone. He had an ally. A new plan formed in his mind, a new blueprint for a new kind of building, one built not with steel and glass, but with revenge and justice. He was ready to play the game. The realization hit Jake like a physical blow. Elena wasn't his mistress, she was his co-conspirator. The woman he'd been chasing was the one person who could help him take his life back. In the sterile hotel room, surrounded by the city's neon-drenched facade, a new kind of alliance was forged. "We can't fight them in court," Elena said, her voice clear and decisive. "We have to fight them where it hurts the most, in the media, in the public eye. We have to make their lies so visible that they can't hide anymore." Jake's architectural mind, trained to see problems as a series of solvable puzzles, began to click into place. "So we build a new case, a public one. We need a new blueprint." "Exactly," Elena said, with a hint of a smile on her face. "And I have all the materials. I was their inside woman. I know how they operate. I know their schedules. I know where they keep their secrets." They spent the next few hours huddled together, whispering over the flash drive. Elena explained the details Jake hadn't understood. The Seraph account was a phantom designed to look like a simple holding company, but it was a shell for a network of illegal transactions. Mark Reynolds wasn't just a corporate raider.
He was a blackmailer with connections to a high-profile politician in Nevada, a key player in the city's zoning commission. They were using his project as a front to launder money and push through a zoning deal that would be a financial windfall for Reynolds. Sarah was her willing partner, a trophy wife turned master conspirator. She didn't want money. She wanted to destroy Jake's legacy and career because she believed he had betrayed her in a more profound way than a simple affair.
She always saw you as a trophy, Jake, Elena explained. Your career was her social currency. But she always felt like you didn't truly see her, that you were more in love with your buildings than you were with her. She found out about me and she didn't get angry. She got calculating. She saw an opportunity. She saw a way to hurt you by hurting what you love most, your work. A new cold wave of understanding washed over Jake. His affair with Elena hadn't been the cause of his downfall, it had been the catalyst. Sarah had been planning this long before he ever met Elena. She had been waiting for the right moment, for the perfect weapon. "So what's our move?" Jake asked, his mind racing. "The gala," Elena said. "The annual Architects' Gala. It's in 2 nights. Everyone will be there, all your clients, all your rivals, the press. Sarah and Reynolds will be there celebrating their impending victory. We're going to expose them, but not with a simple speech. We're going to use what we know to publicly corner them." "How?" "Reynolds has a tablet he uses to manage his off-book transactions," Elena said, her eyes glinting with a newfound resolve. "It's a heavily encrypted device, but it's linked to his cloud account. I know his security patterns. I know his habits. We can create a fake meeting invitation, a phishing link that looks official. If he clicks it, it'll give us a 5-minute window to access his data. We can't download everything, but we can access his schedule, his recent communications. We'll find something incriminating, a message to Sarah, a call to a shell corporation. We'll use it to corner him in front of the press and your peers. We'll make him admit to the public that he's a fraud, a criminal. We'll force him to give up on this whole project." "And Sarah?" "She'll be right there beside him," Elena said. "Once he's exposed, she'll go down with him. The public scandal will ruin them both. No one will touch them again. The deals will fall through. Your firm will be safe." The plan was audacious, dangerous, and brilliantly simple. It was an architect's solution. Use the opponent's own structure against them. "We need to get to Frank," Jake said. "We're going to need his help with the hacking." "I've already called him," Elena said. "He's waiting for us." They left the hotel room, 2 shadows slipping into the neon glow of the Las Vegas night. The city, which had once felt like a cage, now felt like a battlefield. The game was no longer about survival, it was about victory. They had the evidence, the plan, and the will. All they needed was the right moment to strike. Jake and Elena arrived at Frank's office, a small, unassuming space tucked away in a quiet corner of downtown. The room smelled of old paper and stale coffee, a stark contrast to the opulence they had just left. Frank was hunched over a desk, a dozen monitors glowing with lines of code. He looked up, his face impassive as he took in Elena. "You're not who I expected," he said to her, his gaze sharp and appraising. "She's the key, Frank," Jake said, his voice firm. "She knows everything." Elena wasted no time. She pulled up a chair and began to explain the intricacies of Reynolds' security. She detailed his habits, his obsession with a specific kind of encryption, and the one weakness in his system, a direct link between his tablet and a cloud storage service. Frank listened intently, his fingers flying across the keyboard, already building the framework for their attack. He was a master craftsman, and in this moment, Jake saw that an investigator's work was not so different from an architect's. Both required meticulous planning, an understanding of the structure, and a precise execution. Their plan was simple, audacious, and brutally effective. Frank would send a fake, official-looking meeting invitation to Reynolds' tablet. The link in the invitation would trigger a piece of malware that would give them a 5-minute window to access his cloud account.
They weren't going to steal everything, they just needed one piece of incriminating evidence, a text message, a calendar entry, a financial transaction that would be impossible to deny, a single, perfect thread to pull that would unravel the entire conspiracy. "It has to be perfect," Jake said, his voice strained with anxiety. "We get one shot at this. If he catches on, he'll lock everything down. We'll lose our leverage." "It's a small window, but it's enough," Frank said, his eyes never leaving the screen. "We have a message ready to go. The moment he's distracted at the gala, we send it. The moment he taps the link, we have 5 minutes to find our proof. We'll be connected to his system, but for only a very short time. No one will ever know we were there." As the clock ticked down to the start of the architect's gala, Jake felt a new kind of calm settle over him. He was no longer a pawn. He was a player. He was no longer building. He was dismantling. The years he had spent designing complex structures had prepared him for this moment. This was the ultimate design, the one that would decide the fate of his family and his life's work. Before they left, Jake made a final, heartbreaking call to his kids. His son, Leo, answered, his voice groggy with sleep. "Dad, where are you?" "Hey, buddy. I'm a little busy. I just wanted to say that I love you guys more than anything in the world. No matter what happens, never forget that."
"We love you too, Dad," Leo said, his voice innocent and trusting. The simple words were a dagger to Jake's heart, a reminder of everything he stood to lose. He hung up and wiped a tear from his eye. The mission was no longer about revenge. It was about protecting his children, about giving them back a life free from the lies their mother had built. They arrived at the gala, the sprawling ballroom of the Aria Hotel buzzing with the city's elite. The air was thick with the scent of perfume and money. Jake saw Sarah immediately. She was a vision in a sleek, black designer gown, a cold, elegant smile on her face as she greeted clients and rivals. She was a predator in her natural habitat. She was standing next to Mark Reynolds, a self-satisfied grin on his face. They were celebrating, not just the success of the hotel project, but their victory over Jake. As he walked into the ballroom with Elena by his side, Jake felt the eyes of everyone on him. The whispers, the glances, the judgment. He could feel it all, but he no longer cared. He had a new purpose. He was no longer a victim. He was a hunter. Frank gave him the signal. "The email is sent. He's talking to a reporter. He's distracted." Jake looked at Elena. She gave him a small, reassuring nod. He had to trust her. This was it, the moment of truth. He walked straight toward Reynolds and Sarah, his eyes locked on their faces, the flash drive a cold weight in his pocket. The game had just begun, and this time he was playing to win. The ballroom was a sea of glittering gowns and tailored tuxedos, the air a heady mix of champagne and ambition. Jake and Elena moved through the crowd, a silent storm in the midst of the calm before the hurricane. Jake felt the weight of every lie, every betrayal, and every risky move he had made. The flash drive in his pocket was a cold reminder of the evidence, and Elena, by his side, was the living, breathing proof that the game had changed. He saw Mark Reynolds and Sarah laughing with a group of investors and reporters near the main stage. They looked like royalty, the king and queen of the Las Vegas elite, unaware that their reign was about to come to a spectacular and public end. "Frank gave the signal," Elena said, whispering, her voice barely audible over the din of the crowd. "He's distracted. It's time." Jake's heart hammered against his ribs. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the confrontation. He had spent his life building things, not tearing them down. But tonight, he was going to dismantle the lies that had nearly destroyed him.
He walked with purpose, Elena a step behind him, a human shield. As they approached the group, Sarah's eyes widened in a flicker of surprise and annoyance. Her smile faltered.
Reynolds, however, just looked at them with a smug, almost pitying expression. "Jake, so glad you could make it," Reynolds said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I was just telling everyone about the extraordinary success of the new hotel project. A real architectural triumph. Pity you won't be around to see it finished." Jake ignored him and looked at Sarah. "Hello, darling," he said, his voice as cold as ice. "I believe you have something of mine." Sarah's face went blank for a second, a mask of practiced composure. "I don't know what you're talking about, Jake. Don't make a scene." "No, don't worry," Jake said, his eyes still fixed on hers. "The scene is all yours. I just wanted to introduce you to my associate, Elena." Reynolds' face paled. He looked at Elena with a mixture of shock and rage. He knew her. He knew she was a weakness, a loose end. He reached for his jacket, instinctively checking for his tablet. "That's right, Mark," Elena said, her voice a calm counterpoint to the storm brewing in Reynolds' eyes. "Did you miss me?" Reynolds pulled his tablet from his pocket. He was a man of action, and he was already trying to secure his systems, to lock them out. But it was too late. Frank had already sent the email. Jake watched as a notification popped up on the tablet. It was an official-looking email from a dummy account Frank had set up, with a subject line about a last-minute zoning change. Reynolds, distracted and panicked, tapped the link without a second thought. In the span of a single heartbeat, Frank was in. "Mr. Reynolds," Jake said, his voice rising, drawing the attention of the reporters, "I believe you have a pending transaction to a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands, a very large one, I might add. It looks like it's set to go through in the next 10 minutes.
Reynolds stared at him, his face a mask of disbelief and pure fury. "I have no idea what you're talking about. You're losing your mind, Jake." "Am I?" Jake said, a grim smile on his face. He held up his own phone, which was mirroring the screen of Reynolds' tablet. The reporters, sensing a scoop, crowded in, their phones and cameras raised. They could see it, a detailed transaction summary, a wire transfer for millions of dollars to an account with a name they couldn't possibly know. But Jake did. "I have the details of your whole operation, Mark," Jake said, his voice loud and clear. "The bribes, the shell corporations, the blackmail. I know you're using my firm's project to launder money and push through a zoning deal that would make you millions. And I know you tried to use Elena here to do it, only she got wise to your plan and ran." Sarah, seeing her perfect plan unravel before her eyes, stepped forward. "This is insane! Jake, stop! You're ruining everything!" "I'm not ruining everything, Sarah," Jake said, his voice full of a heartbreaking finality. "I'm just ending your game." He held up a second screen, showing the picture from the flash drive, Sarah and Reynolds standing in a room with the whiteboard covered in the plan to take down Harrison & Co. A reporter gasped, another started asking questions. "Mr. Reynolds, is it true you're involved in a hostile takeover? Miss Harrison, what is your relationship with this man and what is your connection to your husband's firm?" The perfect facade was cracking. Reynolds was a man of power, but his power came from operating in the shadows. Now he was in the light, and he was melting. His face was beet red, his jaw clenched, and he began to stammer, trying to deny everything. But Jake had one more card to play. He turned to the crowd, his voice resonating with a newfound authority. "The man you see here and his accomplice have been systematically trying to destroy my company, to steal my life's work. They thought they had me cornered, but what they didn't count on is that an architect is never afraid of a little wreckage." The press went into a frenzy, their questions turning into a storm of accusations. Security, drawn by the commotion, began to move in. Mark Reynolds, defeated, looked at Sarah with a look of pure hatred. She had failed. Her plan had been perfect, but she had underestimated the architect, and in her arrogance, she had chosen to play a game with a man who had nothing left to lose. As they were led away, Jake looked at Elena. Her face was calm, serene. The storm was over, and they were standing in the eye of the hurricane, together. The city lights of Las Vegas, once a symbol of his false reality, now looked like a celebration of his new, hard-won freedom. He had lost a wife, a mistress, and nearly his company, but he had won back his life. The aftermath of the gala was a whirlwind of legal proceedings and media frenzy. The glamorous facade of the Las Vegas elite had been torn away, revealing the rot beneath. Mark Reynolds was arrested on multiple charges of fraud and conspiracy, and the FBI swiftly moved to seize his assets and those of the shell corporations. Sarah, her now estranged wife, faced her own charges. Her intricate web of lies and deceit had finally ensnared her. She refused to look at Jake as she was led away, her face a stone mask of defeat. The perfect life she had so meticulously crafted was over. For Jake, the next few weeks were a blur of depositions and emergency board meetings. His company, Harrison & Co., was in chaos. The hostile takeover had been averted, that the firm was in a precarious financial state. The board, initially shaken, rallied around him once they saw the full extent of Sarah and Reynolds' plot. They were impressed by how he had exposed the conspiracy, and his integrity, once called into question by his double life, was now his greatest asset. He worked tirelessly, restructuring the company from the ground up, severing ties with tainted projects, and rebuilding a foundation based on honesty. Frank Miller proved to be invaluable. He managed the legal strategy, ensuring that all the evidence from the flash drive was used to its full potential, and he handled the media, spinning a narrative of a noble architect who had fought back against corporate raiders. "It's all about the story, kid," he had said to Jake over a celebratory scotch. "You're a hero in the public's eye now, a builder who refused to let them tear it all down."
Elena was a different matter. Her role in the drama was a complex one, a blend of victim and collaborator. The legal system, after reviewing the evidence, saw her as an informant who had a change of heart. For Jake, she was more than that. She was a mirror, a reflection of the man he had been, desperate for an escape, living a lie. The night of the gala, as the media swarmed them, she had simply looked at him and said, "Now you're free, Jake." In the days that followed, they met for coffee, for walks in a quiet park away from the city's glare. They talked not about the past, but about their futures. He learned that her escape from Mark's clutches had been a desperate last-ditch effort. She had planned to disappear, to use the flash drive as a way to send a final message to him, a cryptic warning from a woman with nothing left to lose. But he had found her. "I need to leave Las Vegas," she told him one afternoon, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "The city holds too many ghosts for me." "I understand," Jake said. He knew he couldn't ask her to stay. Their connection was forged in the heat of a crisis, not in a calm and honest love. He needed to rebuild his life, and he had to do it on his own. He was no longer the man who needed a second life. He was just Jake, a father and an architect. The most important part of his new beginning was his children. He sat them down and, as honestly as he could, told them what had happened. He didn't hide the truth of his and their mother's relationship, but he emphasized that he had made mistakes and that he was going to spend the rest of his life making it right. They listened, their young faces a mix of confusion and sadness. But in their eyes he also saw a flicker of respect, a new kind of bond, based on a shared painful truth rather than a fragile, pleasant lie. The final scene of his story was not a skyscraper in the city, but a simple open space. A few months later, Jake stood on a small plot of land outside Las Vegas, a place he had recently bought. The sun was setting, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and red. The land was bare, untouched, waiting. He had no immediate plans to build on it. It was a symbol of his new life, a blank canvas, where he could build something new, something real, something truly his own.
He had lost a fortune, a wife, and a double life, but he had found something far more valuable: himself. He looked at the empty land, a sense of peace settling over him. He was no longer running, no longer hiding. He was home.